And we dealt with God's heart for men being in leadership, right? Leadership in our homes, leadership in our relationships. Like we've dealt with that, right? And so we've covered a good bit of ground, and I know there's one more, but it's eluding me at the moment. But aside from all that, let me just remind you, if you've missed any of those, they are available for you, right? If you've missed any of our man-to-man segments, then I want you to know they are available for you. You can catch them on our Facebook page, 93.5 KPPM Shabbat Radio, 24/7 Gospel, right? So they're all there. You can go back and you can watch them. You can tune into them. They're also on my Facebook page, James W. Chavis. They're also on my Instagram, James W. Chavis. They're also, I'm just, trying to help you out, right? I want to help you out. They're also on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, just search at 935 KPPM and they're there, right? They're also on YouTube. That's right. They're on YouTube under I Am Encouraged TV. All right. I Am Encouraged TV. And when you go there, then you'll be able to see all of those videos. You'll be able to see all the man to man segments that we have done, not just this month, but all of them that we've done every month, right? So they're all there and available for you. So it's time from man to man. Now, let's go ahead and jump right on into it. As we begin to look at God's heart, as we begin to study God's heart, and search for, glory to God, God's heart as it relates to men, I want you to know that after leadership, after integrity, after all of that, God's heart for men leads us to connection and communication. That's right. Connection and communication. You say, well, brother preacher, what do you mean connection and communication? Listen, I want you to know and understand that I am so very grateful and thankful. I'm so very grateful and thankful, especially the older I get, for the connection that I have with my father. All right. I did not always have this connection. I've shared with somebody the other day. I met my biological father when I was 21 years old. All right. Yeah, I met him when I was 21 years old, and I didn't want anything to do with him. I didn't want, no, I don't want nothing to do with him. Didn't like him, didn't want to talk to him, whatever. But I appreciate now being able to know my biological father and having connection with him and having communications with him, right? Or being in communication with him, because as I am in communication with him, as I have connection to him, I've learned more and more about myself. I learned, why certain things are are a way that's for me. I learned why I think the way that I think. Even though I didn't grow up with him, I wasn't around him. I still inherited some of his attributes, and now I get it. Now I understand. Now it makes a little bit more sense. But can I also tell you that one of the other things, see, it's important, before I go any further, let me say it's important that we as men, right, are able to have communication and connection with our fathers. And if your father is long gone, right? And I said long gone. If your father has passed on, and he's moved on to be with the Lord, or maybe he didn't know the Lord, but if your father is dead, let me just put it that way. I hate to be so blunt, but if your father is no longer on this earth, right? Let me just say this. It may be then that the next step for you, and this is something that I wholeheartedly believe in, is to have connection and communication with your son, with your nephew, right? With your grandson. I'm telling you, the generations, there is something that comes when the generations have connection and communication with one another. One of the biggest things, one of the greatest things that I have come to admire and to know and to love, in particularly about some of the tribes out in Africa, is that they have the generations of men, and glory to God, the young men know what the standard of being a man is because they have the older generation of men to look after and to look up to. And when they look up to those, they say, okay, I get it. I get a glimpse of what it means to be a man. Now, yes, they still have to forge their own path. But when you have an outline, when you have a blueprint, because you've got connection and you've got conversation, it makes the world of a difference in a young man's life. That he can handle them better. I can handle some of my internal struggles better because I've gotten to know my father, and we have conversations and we are connected. Glory to God. I feel like, oh, brothers, let me just encourage you. One of the greatest things that you can do, one of the greatest gifts that you can give the men in your family, the men who are around you, is connection and conversation. All right. I mean, there is something to be said about connection and conversation between fathers and sons, between brothers, between uncles and nephews, between uh, uh, grandfathers and grandchildren. There's something. There's so many women out there who are able to go back and they can talk with mama and grandmama and all of that. But what about the men? Are they able to connect with the generations? Sadly, no, because some of them have been incarcerated for so long. Some of them, were a rolling stone, and they didn't, stay still long enough. So you don't, but I'm telling you, I want to encourage you. I've got to say it. I've got to get it out, brothers. As we look to grow, as we look to enhance the next generation, there's nothing that can be more beneficial to them. Yeah, it'd be great if you could leave them, thousands and thousands and millions of dollars. But more than that, what would make them richer in life is to have had connection and conversation. I thank God for the connection and the conversations that I had with my grandfather, Mr. Cleveland Nash, many a time right there at 1400 North Shattuck, right? Walking around that cul-de-sac, or working in his shed, or just doing stuff around and about. The connection that I had with him, the conversation that stations that I had with him, they taught me how to be a real man when I didn't know what it meant to be a real man. He taught me how to love a woman when I didn't know what it looked like to even really love a woman properly. There's so many different things that came out of that connection and that conversations, or those conversations with my grandfather, that I wouldn't trade for all the money in the world. He taught me a lot about faith because we had connections and conversations. Friends, now I want to show you this, right? And then I need to press on because I could stay there for the longest, but I need you to also know and understand that it's great that in our families we have connection and conversations as men. But I want to take you a step further, because beyond family, brothers, I want to submit to you. The Bible tells us, it says that iron sharpens iron, right? And one of the greatest stories, I believe, that the Bible gives us, that the Bible shares with us, that the Bible tells us as it relates to conversation and connection, comes when we begin to look at David and Jonathan. they had connection. They had conversations when there were plans and plots to try to get rid of David. Jonathan, because he had connection and conversation with his father, he then was able to turn and have connection and conversation with David and to warn David. And that connection and those conversations helped to save David's life. They helped to preserve David's life. And let me just glory to God. All right, I'm trying to leave this thing about fathers and sons alone, but I need to help somebody here. If you would, I want you to go back. I want you to go back and look at again the story of David. When David had sons, in particularly, right? He had children, right? And we remember the daughter Tamar. And I'm trying to remember the son who he had. I can't recall his name at the moment. But there was a son of David's who David, the Bible doesn't tell us that David had much connection with him, didn't have much communication with him. Neither did he have much communication at a point with Tamar's brother. But after Ishmael, or whatever that boy's name was, after he raped his sister, right after he raped Tamar, he went and hid. And then there was this whole thing of non-communication that David had. He didn't have connection and communication with his own sons. So then one tried to rise up and take the kingdom from him. And granted, that was all a result of what David did with Bathsheba. I get that and I understand that. But still, there was no connection, no conversation. So brother ended up killing brother. And there began to be a struggle, and kingdom tried to be taken from David, and he had to go into hiding and all this different stuff, right? I want to encourage you. If we can just learn how to have connection and conversation, there's lives that can be preserved. There's young women who can be protected. There's so much more that can happen when we have connection as men. As men. Can I tell you, and I'm gonna lead us, this leads us into next week, right? As men, when we have connection and conversation, then we can get a lot of things done because the buck stops with us. When we, and this is what we're gonna get into next week, presence. Presence. Yeah. God's heart for men is that we be present. And that's where we're going to pick it up next week. But let me close out this thing of God's heart, right? For men um, this week, connection and conversation. As we go back and we look at David and we look at Jonathan, God's heart for men is that we have relationship. If relationship, meaning connection and conversation, those are the two big words that I want to use today. If connection and conversation were not so important, then there would have been no need for Moses to have an Aaron or a Joshua, because Moses had Aaron, right? There were some times when Moses maybe didn't feel up to the charge, up to the challenge, because he didn't speak well, because of this, because of that, but because of connection, God gave him connection to his brother, and they had conversations. His brother was able to step up and to, speak up and to handle certain things because Joshua and Moses had connection and conversation. Then when Moses left and exited the scene, Joshua was able to step up and take charge and take control because of connection and conversation. When Joel Osteen's dad passed away, Joel Osteen was able to step into those shoes, and he was able to then begin to preach the gospel. And without a hitch, things begin to go even further. Without a hitch, things begin to expand even more. And to this day, you still can hear Joel Osteen saying, "This is my Bible," right? Because of connection between men is so important. Look at your own families. Look at the times and the situations where your own father was silent. Look at the places and the times where your own men, all the men in your family, they just sat around, didn't say much, didn't do much, right? It's because connection is very important for men, and especially with one another, right? It's great that we have connection. What does the Bible tell us? What does the Bible tell us? When God looked down and he saw Adam, he said, "It is not good that man ought to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone." So he created him woman, right? Now, brothers, here's the last part of it, and then I'm going to speak real quickly to the ladies. Brothers, we've got to make sure we have connection and conversations with our wives. We can't just, shut down on them, not talk to them, but they cannot help us if they don't know what's going on with us. And so I want to close out by saying, brothers, let's make sure that we have connection and conversations with the people who are in our own homes, with the people who are the closest to us. And then, ladies, I know we've got some ladies who are listening, and we've got some who are single moms and some who are raising sons on their own. Listen, it is important that number one, you have connections and conversations with your sons, but then don't deprive. I keep hearing this in my spirit, and I'm going to say it, and this is going to be the last words I say before I close out the show today. Um, but do not deprive your sons of connections and conversations with their fathers, with the next generation, right? Or the previous generation. Even if their father ain't around, or if he don't feel like he's that great of an example, listen, sometimes you've got to let them have connection and conversation so that they can understand what not to do, what not to be, how not to do, and how not to be. And if you don't think that their father was a good example, connect them with your father. If you don't feel like your father was a good example, then connect them with your pastor or somebody who you feel like could be a good mentor for them. God's heart for his people, God's heart for men in particular, is that we get into a place where we learn how to have connection and conversations with one another. I promise you it saves lives. I promise you it makes the world of difference. I couldn't make it without the connections and the conversations that I have with my brothers. We're going to talk about that